Lonely Monk Productions.
I don't know if y'all have seen Fish's New Year's Eve performance of Gamehenge yet, but yo!
That's my Jawn! Hey yo, displace the guilt.
What's good, friends and family, neighbors near and far? Welcome to an all-new season of the Yo, That's My Jawn podcast. The podcast, website, brand, movement, way of life dedicated to the embrace and championing of your passions. I'm your host, Nate Runkle, a.k.a. John LeClaire, a.k.a. Nate 3.0, back at it again with yet another episode of the podcast. As always, I hope this podcast finds you all in good health and in good spirits. On today's episode, I am joined by Charlie Harding of the podcast Switched on Pop. This was a big one for me. I have been a longtime fan of he and his partner Nate Sloan's brilliant examinations of pop music. And to be able to have the opportunity to have him guest on the show for a conversation, well, it meant the world to me. But speaking of conversations, quick note. I was recently lucky enough to sit down with Dan Drago of the 25 O'Clock podcast for a conversation about me. That's right. Dan turned the tables and interviewed me for his incredible show, and I had a great time chatting about my musical past and the podcast and whatnot. So check it out. It's available wherever you get your podcasts, or you can find a link to it on the website and on the socials. Cool. So Charlie and I talk a little bit about this in the interview, and I know I've mentioned it here and there on the show throughout the years, but this podcast, which started as a music blog, has always been a space that I wanted to create to just share and talk about the things that I like and the things that you like. I wanted to create a community where people could unapologetically come and talk about the things that they enjoy, not as a guilty pleasure, but just embracing pure enjoyment. And pop music is one of those things that I have always been a fan of. But for a good deal of time, it wasn't cool to like pop music. You know, it was seen as fake or inauthentic, something that people who have no taste in music enjoy. You know, it wasn't hip. And so for a while, when I was younger, I would keep it a secret how much I really enjoyed what was then deemed corny. But all of it changed for me the very first time I heard a giggle and some footsteps and an in-your-face announcement that I was about to be told what I want, what I really, really want. Yes, the first time I heard Wannabe by the Spice Girls, my mind was blown clear out of the back of my head. It was such a vibe that completely owned my attention. And for the first time, I was meeting Emma in the place, who likes it in your face. Jerry, who, like Mel C, likes it on a Easy V. Victoria, well, she doesn't come for free because she's a real lady. And, of course, we met our narrator of that interlude, Mel B. These were 5 women laying down the law that if, perchance, you wanted to have a chance with any of them, well, you had to get along with their friends, first and foremost, because friendship never ends. It just made me so happy. And as they released more singles, Say You'll Be There and Two Become One, I became obsessed with Spice Mania and the Fab Five. And I refused to let this love be a dirty little secret anymore. I became a loud supporter and defender of the world of Spice. And I remember people saying things like, so you like them as like a joke? Is this some sort of like ironic thing? No, it was pure pop perfection, and that confection was an infection I would no longer ignore. Shortly after Wannabe dropped, there was this single by 3 brothers that crossed my eardrums, and my new pop pride sprung loose by the glory of the Spice Girls caused me very loudly to proclaim, "Bop by Hanson was indeed a bop." My love of pop popped out of the bottle, and there was no chance it was ever being contained again, regardless if you rubbed it the right way. The rise of the boy bands and Britney and Christina, Ricky Martin, Maya, Pink, all of it. I embraced it all. It just made me so happy, and I'd be damned if I'd let anyone make me feel shame for it ever again. You know, we've come a long way from there. Sure, there's still some inherent pop hate. Listen to any asshole who claims that Taylor Swift is talentless. And a quick side note here, you're allowed to not like Taylor Swift. It's fine. But to make a claim like no talent is the quickest way to show me that you certifiably don't know shit about shit. But I digress. Pop is more accepted now. It's less a dirty word. And alongside with his co-host Nate, my guest Charlie today is one of those people helping legitimize contemporary pop music. And so I am honored to have him on the show today to talk about his show Switched on Pop, where pop music is at and where it might be headed. But before we get into all of that, if you're not already following us on the socials, well, you should do that. We're still on all of them, and you can find us at Yo That's My Jawn. Give us a follow. Always got updates and bonus content and live streams shared on them. So, check that out. Or if you prefer having updates hand delivered to you, you can go ahead and visit www.yothat'smyjawn.com. And from there, sign on up for the mailing list. There's all kinds of links there to the main website, to guest appearances on other podcasts, merchandise, of course, which you can buy to support the show. There's all kinds of goodness. Okay. All right. We got that out of the way, so let's go. My guest today is a singer, songwriter, producer, and music journalist, multi-hyphenate. Alongside Nate Sloan, he is the co-creator and co-host of the incredibly popular podcast Switched on Pop, which focuses on the musical analysis of contemporary pop music, regularly examining what makes a hit and its place in culture. Together, they wrote the compendium book, Switched on Pop, How Popular Music Works and Why It Matters. His music writing has appeared in Vox, Billboard, and has been cited in Rolling Stone, Entertainment Weekly, The Stranger, The Atlantic, Quartz, and Pitchfork. Folks, it is my honor to welcome to the show, Charlie Harding. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am joined today by the great Charlie Harding of Switched on Pop. Charlie, thank you for joining me on Yo, That's My Jawn.
Oh, so happy to. Thank you for having me.
I've been threatening to do this supercut for my wife particularly, which is guest's reaction when the persona comes on when I start the interview, because it's a bit of a change, a bit of a shock, but it always makes me smirk. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm so excited to talk to you. I always like to kind of kick things off just by telling people my familiarity with them or some kind of connection I have. And with
Sure.
you, your podcast, one of the inspirations for me to get back into podcasting. I've been an enormous fan of your show for a very long time, and I've been
thank you.
an unapologetic pop fan my entire life. And the entire premise of my website, my podcast, and everything has always been displace the guilt, embrace the pleasure. And it's just to unapologetically like the things that you like. And
Sure.
and so, you're not going to remember this, but back in like 2017, I sent you guys a bunch of emails because I was so obsessed with your show. With just
Nice. Yeah.
There was like a breakdown of Malibu by Miley Cyrus. That was one of my emails. A big thing on Dancing on My Own, which I'm obsessed with. But anyway,
Yeah.
so
Similarly.
it's just the best song ever.
Yeah.
But so
I have danced in a I have danced in a flash mob to that song.
phenomenal. I love that.
I've not done a lot of flash mobs. That's not a big part of my personality, but Robin is.
Yes, 100%. And the other, which I still think you guys should tackle at some point, was I sent this email about artists who are enormous across the world but could never break in the U.S., particularly Robbie Williams. Who is, a global superstar, except for he can walk down the street and not be bothered in the United States. It's very weird to me.
There was just a great TikTok of Lil Nas X hanging out in a subway station in Japan and everybody walking by him, and the clip is basically saying like how I can prove that nobody knows who I am in Japan. and it's just like sad music, and all he wants to be is recognized.
Oh, it's incredible. Is that those videos always make me laugh when it's like, a famous musician busking in a subway and no one gives a crap. Like, it just makes me feel oh, okay, good. It happens to you too.
I kind of love it because my love of pop music, I think, is tempered by a distrust or disdain even for celebrity. I find celebrity and the things around pop music, all of the extra musical characteristics, way less interesting than the thing that wants to make you move. The music is way more my jam. My Jawn.
You're Jawn. There it is. There. Yes. See? You're already on brand. See, this is going great.
Working on it.
But I always like to start these things out giving everybody just a little background. So tell everybody a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Northeast, the United States. My musical life started a little bit late. There wasn't too much music in the household other than constant NPR in the car. I really didn't like it as a kid. And then somehow in my early 20s, I became an absolute convert. I listened to NPR all the time, and I was like, I want to make a podcast, just like all those great NPR podcasts that I love. So it was a lot of NPR, and at that time in my region, I grew up in Maine. It was predominantly still sort of like classical music. I feel like NPR hadn't come into its own, playing more contemporary music. I was really lucky to have in middle school I was required to learn an instrument, and I had a guitar teacher who absolutely changed my life, because not only did he get me playing music, but he gave me a best friend, which is a really sad thing to say because I think my guitar became my best friend through
nice.
Much of middle school and high school. It was like a really useful crutch to deal with all of the, everyone deals with the issues of like alienation and social awkwardness in those years. And the guitar is a great thing to hide behind. And so I got to hide behind that for a long time. And I was very fortunate in college to meet a collaborator, Nate Sloan, who is now a professor of musicology at USC, where we met in music classes and developed a very deep relationship around our love of popular music, or love of music, and our love of music education. And long story short, was able to build a surprisingly successful career as a music journalist, making my show Switched on Pop. So that's a very truncated version of how I came to be.
Yeah. So it's wild, like the connections we make that kind of grow with us. Was it an immediate thing between you and Nate? Like when you met?
No, definitely not. No, it took us a minute.
Really?
I was a fairly unsuccessful music student. My university, which I really loved, had a music program that was much more focused on Western art music, classical music, etc. And I come to the world as a pop music guitar player, and I didn't quite fit into the department. They didn't know what to do with me. I eventually had a professor who was like, he even said to me, he said, "You're not going to be a Beethoven. You probably should figure out something else to do with your college experience," which is pretty hurtful. I now get to teach music at the music school at NYU, so screw that guy.
Yeah, what did he know?
What did he know? No, it was just they were the wrong program for me. They were actually a really great program. Nate, on the other hand, was like little Mozart. Well, he that's not the right metaphor. He's an exceptionally talented jazz pianist, and he was really adored in the program, and really succeeded overwhelmingly. And I remember I used to really look up to him as a musician. It's a weird thing, musicians. Sometimes we focus on the wrong thing. We look at the issue of like raw talent, virtuosity, which is emphasized a lot in Western art music. I don't say that despairingly. It just is true. When in reality, sometimes the best part of music is the relationship. It's communication with the audience, with each other. And I think I looked at Nate originally as someone who's like, oh, he's so much more talented than I am. We could never be friends. I was very fortunate. It was actually after college when we ended up living together in San Francisco. He was pursuing his PhD. I had a totally different career, and we ended up playing in a string band. I really love sort of traditional American folk music, old time music, bluegrass, these kinds of Americana, these kinds of genres, because they're very inviting. You just have to know a couple of chords and an instrument. You don't have to sing particularly well, and you can sit down in a jam session. It's a very, very egalitarian space. And it turns out Nate plays banjo just fine. He's an extremely talented jazz pianist, but he's just a fine banjo player. He's got spirit. He just doesn't have virtuosity on banjo. I mean, I actually love his banjo playing because it's incredibly musical because his ear is exceptional. And I play guitar and mandolin pretty well. So all of a sudden, the everything flipped, and I was like, "Wow, we can actually tables have turned. We can work together. We can collaborate." And it's been a real gift to get to build, to sort of shift that power dynamic from, oh, I'm really kind of scared to approach. I used to go to his shows and watch from the corner because I just wanted to see this guy and some of his other peers perform. And now we're collaborators. So yeah, it totally changed over time.
That's incredible. You know, you mentioned this is a complete side note, but mentioning Americana and like kind of the the entrance and just kind of the openness of being able to jam. I recently was interviewed for a documentary about Americana, and first of all, the first thing they said was, "Can you define Americana?" And I was like, "Oh, I wish you would have asked me this a week ago so I could have prepared because I can't, like I really can't." But one of the things that we got to talking about was there's this new movement right now of like queer people of color in Americana that is so exciting to me because of just the inclusivity and just like hearing these different voices over these kind of, what were pretty much a dominantly white genre for a good period of time. And that like it's really exciting to kind of see that kind of growth in something that people tend to think of as like an old-timey kind of thing,
Oh, I mean, I've loved to see this movement expand. Who's participating. I think a lot of credit goes to the Carolina Chocolate Drops, who worked very hard at showing that so much of the roots of the instrumentation of American music are black instruments, the banjo, and I should say that they're very, excuse me, say just they're cosmopolitan instruments. They're from everything. We have the Spanish guitar, we have the banjo, which descends from West Africa, we have the upright bass coming from classical music, a really complex array of instruments that come together to create this music, which I think because of the association to country music, which can often code white, the genre can code white, and yet perhaps that the inclusivity of those jam sessions has and the work of retelling the history of the instrumentation and the roots of the music as well, the songs, songwriters, so many of the early songwriters of American music were people of color, and so I'm so excited that it has become a more open space. You don't have to sing You don't have to sing Americana with a Nashville twang. You can have any kind of accent.
Yeah, I don't know if you've caught any of the Black Opry project, but WXPN partnered with the Black Opry, and they did they've been doing an artist residency, and then last year they premiered I think 6-part limited podcast based around some of the people within the residency, and it's absolutely phenomenal.
Cool. I'll have to listen.
Yeah, big shout out to that. I get sidetracked very easily, but
all good. Here we are.
So you and Nate are living in San Francisco. You kind of reconnect and all of that, and let these folks know how the beautiful creation of Carly Rae Jepsen kind of kickstarted an entire new chapter in your guys' not just friendship but careers.
I think we all have a lot to owe to Carly Rae Jepsen. She is someone that I think she gives us permission to have unbridled joy and to dig deep into our feelings, deep into our body, and not hold anything back, to be completely unreserved. So Nate and I were on a road trip, and with our partners, and it's one of those unfortunate things where there's 4 people in the car and there's 2 people carrying a conversation, and our poor now wives, I can't remember if we were married then, but we're just having to put up with a long discourse on Nate's newest musical lecture. He was teaching. I can't remember if it was undergraduates or graduates or even high schoolers at the time, but he had taught a lesson on Call Me Maybe. Call Me Maybe was, one of the biggest pop breakouts of 2012, I believe.
Sounds right.
And I thought this was kind of curious. You're teaching a music class about Carly Rae Jepsen. I had come from an experience of my university didn't accept my proclivities for popular music. How could you bring this into the classroom? He said, no, this well, listen, this song is actually brilliant. On the surface, bubblegum pop, sure, fine. Has a great, very funny and ironic music video. Of course, the song is about Carly Rae, or the narrator, singing to the supposed person, the object of their desire, and nervously getting the courage to ask them out. And you're going to call me, maybe, hopefully. And of course, we find out in the music video at the end that actually the object of her affection likes men, and so I think that helped propel the song on YouTube, where it was certainly a hit. But what we loved was how the song functioned musically. What's so brilliant about Call Me Maybe is this hesitation that she has. We all know this feeling. Like, there's nothing more anxiety producing, I think, than asking somebody out on a date. At least for me, as someone who likes to hide behind a guitar. I've been married for a long time, so I haven't had to ask a lot of dates recently. But in earlier years, man, did I sweat bullets over asking someone out. And you hear that in her voice, just like, and the lyric, "Call me maybe." The music reinforces that exact same idea. I believe the song is in the key of G major, but the chords completely avoid the home key. They dance around it and only touch on it very briefly, as if you're in this sort of suspended tension of, will this ever resolve? Will this person ever come home with me? Will we ever get to resolve to the home chord? And the chords sort of dance back and forth in this question and answer. Are you going to call me? Maybe. I don't know. And it's kind of like the whole song is almost like upspeak, and you never get the resolution. And I think the music of the song, Nate showed me in our long drive, while blaring the song again to our very fortunate that our partners put up with us, and I think they were intrigued as well that there was such a deep musical lesson to learn in what appears on the surface as a very bubblegum sort of pop song. We heard that. We had that discussion, and we thought, wow, maybe there's some other pop songs that are ripe for listening more closely and seeing how lyric, melody, all the music might intersect in a way to help unfold the meaning of a song that on the surface we might have not paid enough attention to. And that sort of spawned a whole relationship of talking about music that, gosh, we're 10 years in, nearly 400 episodes of a show that is fundamentally built around that initial conversation.
It's incredible. It's really incredible because, like, it's one of the things, and it's one of the what drew me and kept me listening to your show is actually appreciating pop music, because at the time, it's not that people didn't like pop music, but I feel like there was like a sense of irony to it. Whereas I think you guys kind of build a permission structure to enjoy it without that kind of smirky, like, isn't it funny that I'm listening to Call Me Maybe? Like, it was like, no, there's a reason you enjoy this. And, you don't, and it goes back to what I was saying about displacing, I don't really like guilty pleasure as a thing, because I don't know why you would feel guilty about liking something, unless you don't truly like it,
or you feel social pressure that you're not supposed to like it.
Right.
Well, I really love how you framed this idea of a permission structure. That we had an intern once. I remember I asked her name Olivia Woods, and I asked Olivia to write a paragraph describing what the show was about, and she revealed this concept to me that I had never thought of, and I've never been able to unthink of, which is this idea that pop songs give listeners emotional cues and new emotional vocabulary to expand their life. So just like having the permission structure first to listen to pop, a great song, I think, often will move beyond intellect to help us engage with the human experience in ways that we otherwise don't feel comfortable. And pop is particularly good at doing that because it's immensely somatic. It's about being in our body. It's about sexuality. It's about things that are often taboo to talk about around the dinner table. And that songs give us that emotional permission. Maybe we feel a little bit more comfortable stretching our emotional boundaries.
Definitely. And, I think that's actually tied to something that I wanted to kind of bring up and discuss with you, which is, so, in the book, you guys released a book, a brilliant book, kind of walking people through essentially what you guys talk on the podcast all about, but like using pop songs throughout the, what was it, 16-year span, I think, or...
We looked at, I think, a 20-year history from 2000 to the book came out in 2019, so almost 20 years. To basically explain the essential musical vocabulary through case studies of popular songs. So the podcast is a little bit more is less didactic.
Sure.
This was very much intended to be a text that you could use to help understand a standard vocabulary of melody, rhythm, form, timbre, lyric, and some more advanced topics, and to be able to think about those topics as they relate to music to help maybe unpeel the meaning of a song beyond your initial listening.
Yeah. So in the book, one of the things that really interested me was that you considered yourself a music snob, and that you kind of rejected pop for a while. And like, I know a lot of people like this. It never hit me because I've always liked really weird things. So liking pop was just another weird thing that Nate likes. So like, it never really, but it got me thinking, like, you mentioned and clearly, very truly, people's aversion to kind of queer and female, that kind of inherent bias, kind of adding towards why people kind of dismiss pop a lot of times. But, I think there's something else, and it's kind of what you were just talking about. And that is, I think that people connect with pop because it's so effective. But I think like there's this weird, it's the authenticity thing that people always bring up. And I think it's that people are afraid that, like, look, I feel this way, and if this person does not, and they're faking, then that's like, it's like an affront almost. And I think people kind of reject this, like, it's almost a fear, like you're manipulating my emotions with something I relate to, but you don't. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's this weird kind of like protection almost. Like, it's like people want to be protected from pop.
I think that there is some sort of authenticity trap in popular music. Popular music aims to feel both deeply personal, but also reach a lot of people. It is both a product of art and of commerce. It is both entirely made up and deeply representative of the individual singing it. These tensions, I think, often cause people to fear how to relate to it. Messes with how people relate to the work, and often because popular music sells itself as authentic when oftentimes maybe it isn't. It's full of contradictions. Just a couple of salient examples. I think of the world of like late 90s Max Martin pop music, the world of NSYNC and Britney Spears and the like. Their lives were unfolding in tabloids in ways that were built to mirror what was being said in music that these artists had not a single hand in writing. And so the public persona is as constructed as the song. I don't have any problem with this, but we are at times led to be confused. I think hip hop constantly struggles with authenticity as a marker of legitimacy. So much, I think, especially in the creation of protest music, in a song like Fight the Power, for example. We have music which is incredibly salient, speaks to a political moment, and at the same time, so much of hip-hop culture is also built off of boisterism and just being like over the top and building rhymes that are on the one hand reflective of maybe your lived experience in your city, and at the same time often entirely made up and over the top. And listeners are constantly put in this position of having to navigate between the two. And I think for some of these reasons, I'm not surprised that pop, which has such a clear message of being intentionally popular, intentionally commercial, people are going to be suspect of it being a real art form. I think a lot of these boundaries have been dismantled over the last couple of decades, especially in the destruction of traditional gatekeepers and the rise of fan culture and the open-ended, complete access to every piece of media you've ever wanted. I think a lot of these old notions have really sort of fallen apart. Nonetheless, these debates seem to revive year after year. Who's the real version of whatever?
Right.
And frankly, I'm not so interested in those debates as I am of, well, what does it make you feel? What does it mean for you? What are your friends listening to? Why are they dancing to the thing? I generally take a listener approach more than, I don't know. Rock stars are not here to save you. Your favorite heroes are not here to save you, but their music might help motivate something in your life.
Yeah, I like to think a lot of my sensibility can be boiled down to a conversation I had with my father a very long time ago. And I'm very much my father's son who unapologetically liked the things he liked. He was a bit more of a hater of things than I was. But I remember when the Milli Vanilli scandal happened. All the lip syncing came out and stuff like that. And my dad turned to me and he said, I don't know. Someone sang those songs and they're good. And and it's true, right? Like it doesn't matter any of the controversy or anything behind it. Those are very effective songs. Blame It on the Rain, fantastic song.
Great music, absolutely.
Yeah,
no problem. I mean, and isn't it so funny that now we exist in a world where we kind of expect that big stars at enormous performances with a lot of choreo are probably not singing because it's actually physically impossible to do gymnastics live while also singing your best. And so a lot of music has backing tracks, usually supported with vocals. We know that many times the national anthem as sung at major events is a pre-record, and we're okay with it now. But man, the expectations of authenticity have changed, and they were different in the era of Milli Vanilli. I mean, it destroyed an entire career.
Yeah, I mean, Milli Vanilli, poor Ashley Simpson on SNL dancing a jig when the track triggered wrong.
Not her fault.
No.
You know who should have lost their career is the person who mistriggered the track.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. You mentioned streaming in there, and that's kind of what birthed this conversation between us, because we were having you had posted a thing on Threads asking what people thought
Yeah.
about the state of pop music.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to jump ahead real quick because then like
Yeah.
a week later you were like, pop is dead. And I was like, oh, somebody understands how to work the social game here. But
I don't know. I don't think it did that particularly well. It was I was being a bit of a troll, perhaps, but I'm happy to unwind it.
yeah. But what I had responded with was the fact that I feel like in not just music, but in contemporary popular culture, is in a state of kind of a stunted, arrested development due to streaming. Because things don't disappear, we aren't kind of creating new things. We're just still trying to do the same. We've been trying to do the same thing for, the past 5.5 years or almost 10 years now. I mentioned earlier that I DJ. I DJ occasionally for like high school dances and stuff like that. And I can't tell you how confused I get when I go in, like, I'm like, oh man, I'm out of my element. I'm not too hip on newer things or what's really hitting, the high school dance floor. And I go in and I start playing like stuff on the top of the streaming charts. And then all of a sudden, like a kid will come up and be like, do you have Bust a Move by Young MC? And I'm like, get out of here. Like, I did a 16th birthday, Sweet 16 party, and they sent me the playlist in advance. And there wasn't a song on there older than 2015. Okay, so like something's going on, and I know part of it is TikTok, and it's things going viral on TikTok, especially old songs, give them this whole new second life now. But it made me start to like try to figure out why that is, and it all comes back to me to streaming. Like streaming just in music in general has had a 10 times growth since 2015, and that's kind of like the tipping point. Like from that point is where each year like the growth is just exponential. Prior to that, little variation, but I think this idea that we have all of this material at our fingertips at all points, anytime we want to hear it, I'm not going to say it's bad. I just think it's a paradigm shift that I don't know that we've caught up to yet.
Yeah, well, I think that increased access has definitely led to a changing aesthetic value that rewards nostalgia. And I think that we maybe are... We're stuck in a nostalgia loop. Nostalgia is rewarded commercially, socially, culturally. It's a value to be looking to the past right now. It's very possible that nostalgia could become passé, and that people are like, oh, why you keep looking? The value of nostalgia is meaningful to people, and that may be. It's something that'd be very difficult to unwind. It's got to be a matrix multi-factor reason why nostalgia is so popular right now. Certainly access has got to be a big part of it. We are able to access and explore so deeply into the past that it's fun to deliberately reinvent the past. Now, it's something we've always done. It's always easy to find earlier examples of nostalgia. The entire 1980s wave of like the return to rock and roll. Songs like "I Love Rock and Roll" by Joan Jett. It's like that song is way out of its time. It's very nostalgic, but it's clear that we live in a very nostalgic moment. But I think there's a bigger anxiety going on. I tweeted this message that pop is dead. Now, I was just trying to like troll people a little bit, and I wanted to see what the reactions might be. But it comes from this feeling of this bigger social anxiety that we like to listen to music because we want to feel connected. I think deeply music is about social communing, whether that's through dance or at a concert hall. It's about being a part of society. And part of what streaming has done is it has made music a much more solitary affair. Now we listen to music a lot with our headphones and by ourselves. But even then, I think we're often trying to figure out, well, what are people listening to? There's a reason why Spotify puts the number of listens next to each song, so they can start sort of tell you, hey, this one's popular. You should listen to this one. We want to know what's popular, and yet the at the same time, we've seen this dismantling of all of the traditional gatekeeping methods that used to just be more consolidated, right? There were a handful of critics, magazines, labels, stores. They were able to, and cable channels. They were able to sort of guide listening. There was a clear pathway towards knowing what is truly popular. And now many of those gatekeepers still exist. We still have Rolling Stone. We still have Billboard. We still have Top 40. A lot of these institutions still exist. We kind of have MTV. They kind of play music. They have an award show, and it's still important.
That's true.
And yet it's just the gatekeeping power has become so much more distributed, fragmented, I should say. And you don't have to go through those gatekeepers to sometimes break through. There's endless examples every single week of someone popping through on TikTok who's the next thing. And so I think that there is this social anxiety of like, there's too much, I can't handle it. What should I listen to? What is everybody else listening to? I want to know what I should listen to so I can be a part of the larger conversation. I don't think we necessarily acknowledge that anxiety because we live in such a individualistic society where we're all about optimizing our individual lived experience. But in reality, who we are is built off of all of our social connections. And I think deep down this feeling of pop music fragmenting, it causes this deeper existential issue of I don't know how to relate. I don't know what I should listen to be able to relate to other people.
Yeah.
This is a part of why I think pop music feels dead. The genre of pop is very much alive. These gatekeepers are still alive, but it's more fragmented than ever, and it's causing some upset.
I think you're right. And it's funny that you pointed to our listening habits becoming more solitary as we're still looking to connect, because it's not just it's not just the input, it's also the output. Like the bedroom producer and the people doing things by themselves, on a home DAW is so much more than it used to be. And you guys just had an episode. This will air a little later, but it's this week's episode. Sure. But in the past, you had an episode where you guys were taking listener calls, and someone asked about harmonies. And I was thinking that's part of the answer too, is that there's not bands really. There's not groups of people working on things. There's one person. You played the clip of I think it was the Charlie Puth clip of him layering his own vocals. Sure. There might be 7 or 8 session vocalists who would have tracked that in the past, and now it's him by himself. Like we're still looking to connect, but somehow we're trying to do it by ourselves. It's very strange. It's a very strange time, and I think the pandemic is kind of what kind of built a lot of that anxiety. Is we've been building to this moment of kind of solitude, and then the pandemic forced us into it, and then we were like, oh no, we don't want that. That's not what we want. And now everyone's just kind of running around I don't know what to do. And it's even, I feel affecting the songs we make, because you listen to a lot of the top of the streaming charts, especially in hip hop and stuff like that, and they're not dance floor hits. They're not the kind of thing you even want to play in a party full of other people. They're headphone masterpieces. They're things you want to just kind of sit and just kind of listen to. And I'm not saying there's not a place for that, but I don't
there
know.
is headphone music as much as there is dance floor music.
And the fact that lo-fi beats have become so huge, not just in playlists, but kind of invading into popular music and whatnot. I think about now this is probably 2015, but like the fact that Milky Chance had that big hit with Doses and Mimosas, I'm like, this is what I used to listen to, like as I should have been home at 5 a.m. and stuff like that. And now it's on pop radio and all, but I don't. It's just a weird time right now, and I think you mentioned gatekeepers. I think we were right to disrupt that system, but I also think that like maybe the gatekeeping isn't the issue. Maybe the issue is who we were picking to be the gatekeepers, right? So like if you have an inclusive group of people who kind of help direct people somewhere, and you mentioned Rolling Stone's still around and all, this is it's funny. All of my notes all are just exploding into this one thing. It all kind of, I didn't realize it as I was putting it all down, but like it's one of the other things I appreciate about you guys is you are actually doing music criticism, whereas a lot of music reviews now actually absolutely boggle my mind because no one is reviewing the actual music. It's like, well, this person did this number of streams their first week out and it wasn't a success, and no one's actually critiquing the product. It's very weird to me that we're kind of missing the actual art, and I think that's something you guys do absolutely beautifully.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. Sometimes I think that our project is perhaps sets this artificial constraint. We make a podcast about popular music, which forces it to be about listening, which is what I love. I mean, I love the act of listening, but music has so many components to it. The visual component is extremely important. The dance component is essential. There's all these things that because of our medium, we don't get to deconstruct. And the truth is, I think a lot of people relate to popular music first through other mediums that are not necessarily the music. It might be the visual, the music video. It might be through the fan relationship. It might be through the commercial numbers. So, when we try to take a whole picture of what is a song, I think the way that I work and Switched on Pop works is perhaps I don't mean to say it's artificial, but it intentionally narrows the focus just to the music. I think that there is something very beneficial about it because it makes it a little bit more of a it gives the listener, I think, more agency. If we're wrapped up in someone's social feed and how they're presenting the thing, it further colors our experience of the work. So I love just the act of listening. I a lot of the reason why I make my show is to, I hope, encourage a way of listening and giving tools of listening so that people can dig work on their own. But I do generally agree with you that I think that there is a place for the role of perhaps gatekeeping is just like not a useful word.
Yeah.
Maybe, docent or something is a better way of thinking about it. I often feel like my job is to be a guide through this complicated time of music for folks. I'm really lucky. I get to listen to music for my job. And I don't necessarily have the best ears in the world. I don't know the most about music. There's holes in my listening. But because I'm doing it way more than 40 hours a week, I hope that people will trust me to help be their guide because they've got other things they got to do. And so I'm just very lucky that I get to do this professionally. So I'm glad that there's still a world for some professional music critics. There's way fewer than there were in the past. But I also hope that who gets to have that gatekeeping ability continues to just expand to incorporate more and more perspectives.
Yeah, we need gate guidance counselors.
I love that.
That's the you admit there was a bit of trolling behind Pop is Dead, but what's your pulse on it? Like, what do you like? Is there anything you see right now occurring that you're like keeping your eye on? I guess is
sure. Yeah, I mean, I should explain just a little bit further about this idea of pop being dead. is really a rethinking of a lot of my end of year wrap up from 2023. And part of what happened in 2023 was this very strange experience of Billboard's charts being turned over constantly by these unexpected recordings. Whether it was, I think the thing that really garnered a lot of attention were a number of a number of country songs that played in racist tropes and homophobic tropes that made it to the top of the charts. We also saw the complete takeover in a different way, the complete takeover of the charts by Taylor Swift, including songs that were far outside of a typical release cycle. We had a number of releases by solo acts from the group BTS that rose up the charts quickly. What were some of the other ones that came through? There are endless examples of basically fan communities. Well, the other thing that happens is a whole album will chart. The whole thing will be on the charts at once. And this has a lot to do with streaming and how the charts are counted today. Previously, the charts only counted sales of singles, or they couldn't capture how people were listening to an entire album. Now that they incorporate listening data from the streamers, we know that people are listening to the entire album. And so all the songs on an album might chart. But what happens is just this feeling of fan groups have more agenda setting power on what is popular than what is maybe been traditionally listened to the most amount of people. Like, it feels almost like we've moved from, maybe a useful metaphor would be like going from a two-party system, political system, to a multi-party parliamentary system. And it feels like we have just so many parties who are now affecting the who are deciding what's going to be popular. And it might be a small, a small minority party that doesn't even have a plurality of listening that might actually drive a thing to number one. And I think having watched this happen so many times in 2023, it made me realize, well, is top 40 radio what people are actually listening to? If you go and look at what's viral on Spotify, it doesn't always actually correlate to that. If you look at what's happening on TikTok, it doesn't necessarily correlate to what's happening on top 40 radio. So top 40 radio is not a great place. Billboard is incorporating all this different stuff, but it seems to be an imperfect measure. Maybe the reality is that we just don't have a common music anymore. Yeah. We have many common musics, right? Like last year, I think a lot of people might have been exposed to Mexican regional music who did not grow up listening to that music. It had major breakout on the charts, and I don't. We did some work on this on this story of artists like Peso Pluma, and who broke through into a national conversation, who otherwise probably more of a regional artist, and that's because his fan base are passionate and were able to push him and be bigger than any other artist. So, in the whole thing being, I don't know who's setting the agenda anymore. The idea of what is truly popular and the idea of pop music feels like maybe that concept is not functioning in the same way that it has in the last 100 years.
Yeah. And, I was talking to someone recently about how I feel like the concept of genre in general is kind of antiquated, because it used to be a code word for, if you like this, you can also try this out. And, and that was purely based on what you wanted to spend your money on, because, you didn't have infinite finances to be able to just buy everything and try everything. Whereas now, what does that even mean? It doesn't. Somebody who listens to, say, the new Green Day song doesn't have to be a punk fan. They could just be someone who likes the new Green Day song. They'll take a chance on something because it's a click away. Which is which is not a bad thing again, but it's hard to kind of, like you said, it's hard to pin down, what are we all doing? What are we into?
I think genre, I think there's plenty of reason to have a defensive genre. I've really been enjoying this book, Major Labels, History of Popular Music in 7 Genres by Califacina at The New Yorker. He writes about the sort of the creation of genre, and in particular, points out that genres are often, maybe at their best, a stand-in for a community of listeners, right? And so the labeling of a style of music might actually be a representation of a scene, of a group of people. And I think genre still has a place because there are people who get together and listen to music still. And yet perhaps genre feels less important because there in earlier histories of American music, there were fewer genres. You kind of had to adhere to your genre. There was more expectation of loyalty. If you were a punk, you were a punk. If you were a hip hop head, you were a hip hop head. Yeah, you could cross between the two, but these were different scenes. If you were into disco, you were into disco. Now I think it's just we have much more, to use your term, there's more permission structure to easily float between things, and yet in our capacity to float between genre, I feel like there's also been more desire to understand history and to name where things are coming from. The concerns of cultural appropriation as a popular concern is a recent phenomenon, and we see acts like Beyonce creating Renaissance, which is basically a PhD level thesis on the history of dance music. People are hungry to know, well, how is this related? Where does it come from? So I think genre still very much operates, and we are very concerned with, again, authenticity within genre, and yet we have a lot more permission to build a playlist that is about a mood, and that mood can be pan-genre, and one day we can go to a punk show, and the next day we can go to a hip-hop show, and that's totally okay as long as you're sort of versed in the history and respectful of the history of both of them.
Yeah. No, it's true. Like I'm not I all of my curiosity and all of my comments, sometimes I always feel like come across as like old guy, like, well, back in my day, but
well, it's true. Back in your day, the genres were really different.
Yeah,
they were really
true.
different.
We weren't allowed to do this. It's not fair, but it is exciting to me too. Like, like we keep coming back to, like the permission to kind of do that wasn't around when I was a kid. Like when I was a kid, I won't even say a kid. When I was in college, all right, is when was the first time, I'm going to talk about it in the intro to this, but is the first time when I first heard Wannabe. It blew my mind. Like I was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. And it was before like Spice Mania took over. All right. And I was and I would like play it for people and they would be like, are you out of your mind? Like, what are you listening to? And I'm like, no, come on. Like, and then shortly after that was the first time I heard Bop. And like, it was like a 1-2 punch of just like,
jam.
And that was when I was like, I'm not hiding this anymore. I love this. It's not a joke. It's not ironic. I'm not trying to be funny. This stuff is great. And those were the things that kind of, so it does excite me to see people able to kind of, I even look at like Olivia Rodrigo, right? And Love is Embarrassing, right? Like that's not a pop song, 10 years ago, right? Like that's like I can think of like, that sounds like a Veronica's song. You know what I mean? Like that's like but now it's like, yeah. And she doesn't have to pretend. She doesn't have to like, shave her head or something like that. And it's, this is my new motif or something like that. No, it's just the song I'm playing because I like it. Like it's great. I'm excited by it.
Yeah, I love her album because I think it's a rare example of a major pop act really sticking to a sound. Right, like Guts has 2 sounds.
Yes,
it has pop punk. Pop punk is not even quite the right term, but it's punk and indie adjacent music with a popular intent and dramatic ballads, power ballads, piano ballads. And like those are the 2 things she does, and she writes many songs in both styles that are very successful. It's bold because if you're a big pop act, kind of your job is to fish for singles that are going to go huge at radio. Like that's really where you make all the money still. And you look at an artist, I don't mean to disparage, but I was very disappointed by Miley Cyrus's last record. Now it had some great songs on there, but it pursues a different style of writing, which is non-album oriented, completely single oriented. There's no musical consistency or artistic vision as I hear it. Now, maybe if I spent more time in the lyrics, I would see some more consistency, but the auditory experience is jarring. You jump from place to place, producer to producer. It really is people will say it's the kind of thing where it's like, this was designed by committee. I actually don't think it's not a committee. It's actually like there's just too many different collaborators and there's not a clear vision to guide the thing. Beyonce had a lot of collaborators, but with a really clear vision.
Yep.
And so I still want that in my work. Like if I'm going to spend time with you, fine, you can be a single based artist, that's fine. But like, I just don't release an album. Like release mixtapes, release singles. Just don't give me an album, because if it's an album, I want it to be an album. It doesn't have to be an amazing roller coaster ride that where I experience many different things, but at least just like give me a little bit of have a thing you're trying to say. Olivia has a really strong thing she's trying to say, maybe two things, but she's not trying to say 15,000 things at the same time, and I really appreciate that about her. I think it makes her stand out from the rest.
Yeah, the one half of that is a piece that I've long been trying to put together, which I call the Daughters of the Pussycats, which is I feel like the Josie and the Pussycats soundtrack is one of the most important underrated albums of all time, because I can see the line. It's like Josie and the Pussycats, then Avril, then you get like Kelly Clarkson, Since You've Been Gone. You get like this kind of permission again, this ability for pop people to kind of, hey, look, I rock too. Like I'm allowed to rock. And I don't know if you know the artist Grace Vonderkoon, but she's got this incredible album called Pleasure Pain, I think. But she was on the show and we were talking about it, and she was saying that Josie and the Pussycats was the first time she saw a girl with a guitar, and she was like, oh, I'm allowed to do that. And it goes back to the permission thing again. So like, a long way to say, Love Is Embarrassing to me is like an ancestor of three small words.
Totally. It doesn't, it follows a particular lineage, and it's not the lineage of the Max Martin style of pop writing. And I think for some critics or listeners, if you go to like Popheads, the subreddit, there's a world of people who are really devoted to, sort of maximalist pure pop, the sound that sort of derives from new wave and disco and incorporates New Jack Swing and R&B and gives you Britney Spears and the Katy Perry kind of sounds, even leading to someone like Gaga. Olivia Rodrigo's not doing that. She's pulling from a different set of inspiration, with I think as much lyrical and melodic talent as artists. And it can be unmooring to folks to be like, how is this popular? The other thing that I like is supposed to be what's popular. And it's like, no, these are just all different popular sounds that come in and out of vogue. And my big question for Olivia is she going to have to follow I think it's a fairly gendered expectation of developing different eras. I think it's a brilliant rebrand that Taylor has done of building this idea of, I have all these eras. But a lot of that has to do with the expectation that often female pop stars they are default required each album to have a new identity, new haircut, new look, new style of music, and that's not true of the Foo Fighters. Love Dave Grohl, but like it's not true of Green Day, right? No. You don't want Green Day to change. There are different gendered expectations. I really love the sound that Olivia is doing. I would love for her to just keep on going with it, but it'd be interesting to see what she feels like she's going to have to do to maintain a career in whatever pop stardom looks like in the future. I don't know what it's going to look like.
Yeah. Yeah. At this time, I want to run through these final questions I got for you. I just looked at the clock and I didn't even realize that we're zooming around here. But before I get to it, you talked very early on with Phineas, who I think is an absolute genius, as is his sister.
I recorded 45 minutes of that conversation before I realized that my recorder had stopped and I had to restart it.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
This happens to everybody at least once. And he didn't realize it. And as far as he played it very cool. And I just hit record again. I said, Phineas, I have a pretty tight deadline, and my editor wants this to be like a really tight piece. do you mind if I ask you some of the same questions again and we just do a little short? He's like, oh yeah, sure, no problem.
Oh, nice. Well done.
So I missed a couple pieces of gold in there that didn't make it into the interview. Sorry to interrupt you. What can I tell you about Phineas?
This is just an aside. You mentioned Joan Jett earlier, and I recently rewatched the great Joan Jett, Michael J. Fox film Light of Day from the 80s by Paul Schrader. Don't you think that Phineas and Billie Eilish should redo a remake of Light of Day?
Yeah, why not? I mean, they have proved themselves to be some of the most important soundtrack artists of all time with their contributions to Barbie, to the James Bond universe, and I know they've done a few others. I think what's great about Billie, she's an amazing interpreter of song. There's so many hints of sort of early popular music in her vocal styling. A lot of sort of jazz, Billie Holiday kind of hints here and there. And that was an era of about musical interpretation, less than original authorship. So I would love them to do more cover work. That'd be fun.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. That just popped in my head because I just watched it the other day, and I was like, man, I really think they could make a really good movie here. It's just goofiness. This first section of the Jauntlet is called One Hit Wonders, and it's just in name only. You're just picking a favorite of the two. It starts with Billy Joel or Elton John. Who do you prefer?
Oh, Elton John immediately, but I think that has less to do with like a deep musical bias or even like developed taste, and has everything to do entirely with just exposure. Elton John has a lot more exposure in my life. My first son was born to Rocket Man, so Elton John is definitely the pick.
That's amazing. Number two.
I feel like I need a Billy Joel phase though. It's overdue.
Yeah, what album is The Stranger, the album that's got Goodnight Saigon on it? I forget. Whichever album has Goodnight Saigon, revisit that.
There.
And it's one of those ones where you're just like, oh, you're a genius, and sometimes I think we forget about that.
Probably, almost certainly, definitely a better lyricist, I'm guessing, than Elton John. I mean, Elton, of course, is not penning most of his music. He's working with his collaborator, but what's his collaborator's name? Why am I
Bernie
forgetting?
Taupin? Yes.
Bernie Taupin. Thank you. I had Barry. My brain went Barry, and then I was like, it was gone. Just I couldn't get there. Of course, Bernie. A lot of their music is very like almost psychedelic, and the lyrics are often nonsensical.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You know what my favorite of theirs is though is Songs from the West Coast, which is that I want to say like early 2000s release that was mostly just like Elton and a piano.
Oh, cool.
It's got like This Train Don't Stop on it. It's got I Want Love, the one that he did the music video with Robert Downey Jr. Really strong.
Oh, okay. All right. Now I've got some Elton work I gotta go explore too. All right, let's go back to the Jauntlet. What do we got next?
Sorry, Debbie Harry or Joan Jett?
Definitely Debbie Harry. I think that the she made the connection of disco and punk and fused these two things that were not meant to be together. And Joan Jett for me is just a bit more of a rock and roll revivalist. You can love either of their music, but just like historically and as a music critic, I'm going to be much more into the work of Debbie Harry, who also, for better or worse, has the first #1 rap song with Rapture.
That's right.
Which is such a bizarre part of history, that the early part of hip hop, no one believed that rap was going to be anything but a fad, and so everyone sort of tried it on, and so Debbie Harry tried it on, like many other artists at the time,
and it worked. It's a great song. Aretha Franklin or Tina Turner?
Oh, that's a really difficult decision. I mean, I remember watching the Kennedy Center honors for Aretha Franklin in the last couple of years of her life, and her performance was one of the best performances I've ever seen. And both of them were unbelievable career artists, where it just like it only got better, which is so rare in pop music. So I can't choose. I feel a slight lean towards Aretha's performance because how wowed I was. But no, this is an impossible choice. This is you shouldn't pit these people against each other.
It's actually Beyonce's fault. I don't know if you remember. So Beyonce at an award show referred to Tina as the queen. And Aretha got upset about it, and so that's what that was. This is only a reference to that. Everything's got little Easter eggs.
Now I'm siding with Tina Turner though, because I think anybody who's too concerned about their titles, well, who cares?
Yeah, you do not respect their monarchy. I get it. Nirvana or Pearl Jam?
Nirvana. I've never been a deep lover of Pearl Jam's music. No shade, no hate. I really admire the depth of community that they formed around their music. But again, just sort of in the world of music history, there's probably no more important recording of the 90s than Smells Like Teen Spirit. Now that's a contestable, that's something you put in the Jotland. What's a more important recording than Smells Like Teen Spirit? There's many, but that
right.
That is that will be in the history books forever.
Certainly. The next one, Janis Joplin or Stevie Nicks?
Oh boy, they're slightly different eras and feel not entirely comparable. I feel like at an earlier point in my life it would have been Janis Joplin, and now it's Stevie Nicks, and I don't know if that's just because of TikTok bringing back Fleetwood Mac. But
yes.
Right now, it's Stevie Nicks for me.
I like it. The big cliche: Beatles or the Stones?
I grew up on both of them, but for the sheer songcraft, for me, it would have to be the Beatles, because for 10 albums they somehow never really repeated themselves. Certainly in like the last 6 albums, they kind of invented whole new song styles. I remember Paul. Maybe it was Chaos and Creation in the Backyard. Maybe that was like mid 2000s ish. One of his solo albums. He had this song called Jenny Wren, and he was explicit. He was like, "Oh yeah, this is me ripping off Blackbird. I created the style of the song Blackbird, which is the most covered songs of all time. And I was like, if anyone can rip that off, I can do it." And I think Jenny Wren is one of his most beautiful songs of all time, even a little bit more heart wrenching than Blackbird. Anyway,
that's awesome.
Yeah, for that reason.
That's awesome.
Also, this is you shouldn't listen to pop stars shouldn't do interviews. They are not our heroes. But when the Stones on their last press tour going around, we had this issue of it was Keith. Yeah, Keith was asked about hip hop, and he's like, "I don't like it when people yell at me. I don't listen to rap music." And I'm just like, I think like you guys have been yelling at everyone for a really long time. It was one of the worst takes in music. It was very old man yelling into the.
That's awesome.
Anyway. So he lost me there.
Yeah, I get that. I do often like wonder like if they've just not experienced the last like 15 years. Like when Jan Wenner made the horrible comments about geniuses and whatnot. I was just like where are you? Like you couldn't have missed everything that's happened in the past 10, 15 years.
You've either under like a deep rock full of grievance or like somehow very deeply unstable, because those comments made absolute no sense to me.
Yeah, and I don't even think he believes it. Like that's the worst part, is like I know he knows that's just inherently wrong, especially to use the word articulate, which is so loaded. Ooh. You know what I mean? Like, my goodness, sir. Unbelievable. Last one of the one-hit wonders: Bohemian Rhapsody or Stairway to Heaven?
Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah.
Too many. I mean, you've DJ'd a lot of dances. Stairway is the worst last dance. There was a lot of Stairway last dances. I love a good air guitar solo, but that's a slow jam of a song that makes absolutely no sense. And even Robert Plant, who once called me a jackass in an interview.
Wow.
Kind of jokingly, I think. Also, he could have been calling himself a jackass. It's not entirely clear. It's in the episode I interviewed him and Alison Krauss. He's a very cheeky gentleman. Even he says he doesn't know what that song is about. Bohemian Rhapsody maybe doesn't make any more sense, but is there anything more fun to sing along with your friends? Like, thank you very much, Dana Carvey and Mike Myers, for giving us permission
Yes.
to sing at the top of our lungs. So Bohemian Rhapsody right now.
I love it. I love it. The last section, top 10 countdown. These we use the word Jawn in Philly to be whatever you want it to be. It doesn't have to be music. It can be literally anything. As a good friend of mine once said, Philadelphians use the word Jawn like Smurfs use the word Smurf. So the first one is your first Jawn. What was the first thing you were obsessed with when you were a kid?
Oh, it was probably Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I look I think in how the whole Star Wars universe has unfolded, I really regret having spent so much time there.
Oh, geez.
I don't know. It's just like I don't feel like it's like actually added positively to my life in any way. Okay. And I feel like Disney destroying the extended universe that existed kind of like destroyed a larger creative universe, and I just think Disney has really destroyed a lot of valuable IP. And I mean, also the prequels they were so bad. I was so let down. So I don't know. It made me skeptical of letting world building into my life again.
Understandable. I will also, though, say that you're saying this to a man who got married dressed as Han Solo. So, careful.
Oh, I love that. I mean, I was deep in it, and I think I was let down. So
I understand. I trust me. I definitely understand. Number 2, what's your current Jawn? What are you into right now?
I feel like my obsession of the last many years has been synthesizers. I love synthesizers and spend way too much time like programming them, learning everything about them, learning how to generate sound. But I think I'm at the end of this, Jawn, because it is a financially unstable. I mean, it's not collecting cars, and I have enough synthesizers, and I have a lot of synthesizers, but not too many. So I think I'm now in a place of needing to say goodbye to some of them, but definitely synthesizers has been my thing.
Is it to the point of let's put a parental block on reverb.com, or is it like
I have put a block. I mean, the pandemic, especially for many of us, was a time of musical acquisition. Many people picked up instruments for their very first time, and I really built out my studio in that time, and my studio got to a place of being more complicated than it was creative.
Okay.
And so the paring back is recognizing every instrument that you bring into your life, you have to learn. And for me, I like to master. And I think having casual commercial goods in our life is just wasteful. And so I think I went a little too deep, and it actually hampers creativity at this point in making things. So there's a balance there. I've crossed the threshold.
Okay. Yeah, it's a good awakening to have. It's a good one to. Number 3, what was your first live show you ever saw?
So the first live show that I walked into, I think I was 10, maybe 11. My friend's family had taken us to Disney in Florida. My parents would never take me there, but they're like, all right, if you really want to go, you can go along. And playing a show while we were walking from one, I don't know, ride to another, was Casey and the Sunshine Band. So
awesome.
Casey and the Sunshine Band was technically the first live show that I got to witness.
Incredible.
And then I got really deep into the world, the jam world of the early 2000s. And my parents, I think it was the worst thing I was very grateful that they allowed me to borrow their car so my friend could drive it 17 hours north to a festival put on by Fish for like 100,000 people, and I was 15 years old, and I was very enamored by that world for a while.
I love it. Did you watch the Gamehenge that they just put out?
I was there in person. I hadn't seen Fish in maybe 15 years, and next to Star Wars, probably the Fish universe was the only other like larger universe that I became very invested in. And throughout high school, I learned to play many of their very intricate, complex, composed guitar pieces on guitar, and probably helped my chops a lot. I had reached out to Fish's publicists about wanting to do a story on them, and I particularly wanted to do a story about the Sphere where they're performing in Las Vegas, and
And they said, well, hey, just so you know that there are some tickets around for this Madison Square Garden run if you'd like to go. I was like, well, I'll be back home in New York on New Year's Eve. I'm happy to go to that show. And I had completely forgotten that the kind of world building that they do, and that they had this musical about a world called Gamehenge. And I was just like, it was weird. I felt like I had been a part of a culture that I had left behind, and I got to witness the pure ecstatic joy of thousands of people, tens of thousands of people experiencing this like long neglected fantasy musical that had been played in 2 decades, and they were losing their mind. And I was like, what is this? It's a musical about lizard people looking for the helping friendly book. This is nonsense. The music is Fish is wonderful because their music is absolute baloney. Their lyrics are ridiculous. Like, rarely have deep meaning, which is kind of great because you can associate any meaning you want. And yet the building of the universe around them, oh my gosh. So that was an experience.
It was like 95, 96. I was heavy in on rec.fish.net back in the news group days. And I had tried to find a way. I was a film, I went to school for TV and film. I wanted to be a filmmaker. Nice. And my big idea was I wanted someone to get me in contact with the band because I wanted to pitch them a film adaptation of Gamehenge that was essentially Fish's Labyrinth. So it would have been
cool.
It would have been the band surrounded by Muppets playing all of the characters. So when someone told me they did Gamehenge and they had like puppets and stuff, my head exploded, and I literally last night finally sat down to watch it, and I had tears in my eyes because it was everything I ever wanted, and now it exists. And same as you, I probably not since like early 2000s have I been into Fish, but like it all came flooding back to me just watching that video last night.
I didn't even realize that they are like at their biggest ever right now. They're having their biggest tours. They're one of the top touring acts in America, and I guess they're now in their 3.0 phase. Or fans call it this, and their 3.0 audience is their biggest audience they've ever had. I had no idea that it's just been growing and growing and growing. And I promise you, despite all the time that I spent with their work, I have no idea what the story of Gamehenge is and what it means. And I just watched it, and I don't understand what it is. And I really need Vox to make like an explainer video that is like, what does this thing actually mean? And I think perhaps the lack of specific meaning is what makes it so effective.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. So I'm going to guess, does that answer number 4, your last concert?
Yeah, I haven't seen anything since Fish's Madison Square Garden show.
Yeah, and how do you? How do you? That's amazing. Number 5, favorite concert you ever saw, favorite live show?
I don't feel like I can. I don't like ranking things. I'm a music critic.
That's why I said favorite.
I hate ranking things. I have favorites, and I'm going to give you one that was quasi recent. I loved Caroline Polachek's last tour. Her another album, Desire I Want to Turn Into You. That album, like Fish, is can't believe I'm comparing it to Fish. There's not a lot of direct meaning in the lyrics. Sure. They're very artful, very metaphoric, and she often intentionally is evasive. Not in a mean way, but just like, I want people to figure out what it means to them, because like how it came about is not necessarily the most inspiring thing that this song can be. Her performance was one of the most realized live shows, where the set list, the choreo, the lighting, the all of the backdrop, everything sort of took this almost musical hallucinatory world and built this larger world around it. I left so impressed. I love her because she proves that you can have pop success and find your best voice multiple decades into your career.
Yeah, definitely. The did they just release her Tiny Desk, or did I only just see it recently? I can't remember, but
it was quite recent, and nobody can do that vocal work live that she can do.
It's insane. That's what I was just going to say. Like, it's just like mesmerizing to watch, and just, just inspiring.
I realize I'm particularly biased because I spoke to her, and it was one of my worst interviews ever because I had just gotten a piece of really bad news beforehand that actually turned out to be okay later on. But I went into this interview, like sat down in the chair where I'm sitting now, and was like, I could not feel worse. And I was just like, all right, I'm just going to run through the motions, do this interview. I got to get back to my personal life. Like something bad was going on. And she just like lifted me up in a way. We didn't talk about it, but she was just like, despite me having no energy, she made the interview great. It's very uncommon that this happens. A lot of pop stars they've done too many interviews. They're exhausted. They're on tour. And it can be a challenge to get good material out of. She gave me the best interview I could possibly have gotten out of being in my worst possible state. So love Caroline in a lot of ways.
Unbelievable. I love it. Number 6, who have you never seen live that you wish you would have? They can be living or dead.
Rolling Stones. I've seen Paul many times. I've never seen Ringo, but so I've gotten my Beatles fix. I do love the Stones, and I would love to see the Stones.
Got one last time, I guess they say, right?
Is that what they said? All right, I'm gonna have to go spend way too much money on StubHub. I will say this might be a very controversial opinion, but I'm really glad I didn't spend the money to go to the Eras tour. The film was great. I enjoyed the film. Someone else needed my ticket, and I didn't need to spend $1,000 to go see that show because the film was so good.
Yeah, that's a question I wanted to ask. Have you guys heard anything from Taylor or Taylor's camp about the tea drop?
I have a doctorate level understanding of how she composes melodies, and one of her melodies, the tea drop, the ba 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 or ba ba ba, that da da da, she does over and over and over in her songs. And I have interviewed. No, the answer is no. I've hounded her publicist Tree, who probably just thinks I'm extremely weird, and I've talked to Jack Antonoff, and Aaron Dessner as well, two of her collaborators, but we've never been able to get to the inner secrets of her songwriting. I hope to one day. I told you about the synthesizer problem. One of the synthesizers I own inadvertently happens to be the synthesizer that she played on her 1989 tour. The actual exact special edition instrument made by Dave Smith of Sequential Circuits that was made for this tour. I just happened to buy it on Reverb, and it turned out to be this instrument that she had played live, which I think she continues to sort of troll me in my personal life in a very she leaves me personally specific Easter eggs, and I would like to have a conversation with her.
That's awesome. Number 7, name an unappreciated Jawn, something you wish more people paid attention to.
I don't know why, but the first thing that comes to mind for me is I really have always loved, since I started playing music, the mandolin player Chris Thile. He's very well known. He's won a MacArthur Genius Award, so it's not like he's hurting. He plays at Lincoln Center, and he used to be he was for a time the heir to the Prairie Home Companion world and his show Live from Here on NPR. So he's doing great, but his music has always spoken to me because of his blend of incredible virtuosity, but with really delicate, beautiful songwriting and an appreciation for all of the histories of music. So if you haven't spent time with Chris Thile's music, I highly, highly recommend it. I don't think he's underappreciated, but I think that there could always be more appreciation of Chris Thile's work.
I dig it. Number 8, I'm sorry, it's a rank. Favorite album?
Probably the album I've spent the most time is Revolver. And I think because the Beatles' Revolver ends with Tomorrow Never Knows, it makes it the most important record for me. And it will probably be the record that I listen to the most throughout my life.
Did you get the big box set that on the reissue?
I did not do the giant box set. At which stage? No, I do own one of their box sets of all their LPs that were remastered, but I think they keep reissuing things, so I don't know. I don't know. They just put an extended out,
and it has rain. It has a rain at regular speed. How they recorded it.
And, interesting.
It's insane. Ringo is just screaming on the drum set. It's really incredible. I love it. I love it so much.
All right, I'm gonna spend time with it. If I could remake the drum sound of Tomorrow Never Knows, I'd be a happy person.
100%. Number 9, name an artist whose output you'll consume anything they release.
Charlie XCX. When I produce records, inspired by her, I have my producer handle is Charlatan, but I spell it CHARLI and then the word TEN, a nod to Charlie XCX. And because the charlatans already exist, and because I feel like a charlatan in everything that I do. She is a bizarre creative force, and everything that she makes has a lot of artistic intent, and it's very pure pop. And so anything that she puts out, I'm absolutely going to listen through all the way.
That's incredible. I only learned about the Charlatan by visiting your old SoundCloud, which you should probably
That's so embarrassing.
I do deep dives when I do my research.
I don't think I've put anything on there in a decade.
Yeah, it's been a while. I think I forget. Actually, I think there might have been something on there 3 years ago. Maybe it said or something like that.
Oh, okay. Deep pandemic. All right.
Yeah. But also, shout out for Party Nation. Incredible song.
Thank you. I did produce I had a very tiny small hand in the production of a song by the Kenyan producer Blinky Bill, a song called Party Nation that featured 5 other artists. I think they were all Kenyan artists, and the song I was told did play on pop radio in Nigeria at one point. So that's my greatest claim to fame.
It's awesome. It's a bop. It's definitely a bop. Number 10, the last of the Jauntlet. What is your favorite Jawn of all time? Can be anything you want it to be.
My favorite Jawn of all time?
Yeah.
I don't know, like pizza.
Yeah, great answer. What's your topping? What's your poison?
Oh, well, I've just moved to New York for the first time of my life, and so now I'm just like, I want a New York slice, just like plain. Like I've regressed. My greatest Jawn, though, in reality is like got to be a like mountain vista looking over the ocean. If you can put me in that place at any moment in life, that's the only place I want to be.
That's absolutely beautiful. So you guys are still on a weekly release, which is crazy to me. Like, like I don't even know how you do. I did like I think 2 months of a weekly release, and I was ready to pull my hair out. Now I'm a team of 1, but still, like
we're a team of 2.5. Yeah,
yeah, it's incredible the output and consistently good. That's the other thing. Like you're not just putting things out. But tell these fine people where they can track you down and track the show down.
We're switched on pop on every single platform. I am at Charlie Harding on most every platform. Like many, I have receded away from X and trying to participate more on Threads, I guess. Starting to do short form video because traditional music journalism, I guess, is also dead, and I guess I have to be a content creator. Which I think because of my my New England upbringing, I'm very not want to share my face, but I'm starting to do so more. But yeah, at Switched on Pop everywhere. And if you happen to be a student at NYU, come take my classes.
I love it. Thank you so much for doing this. I don't know if you ever heard the joke that the closest anyone can know what it feels like to be a ghost is to listen to a podcast where 2 hosts are fumbling for a piece of trivia that you know the answer to. And you guys have been a ghost of mine for a very long time, and I feel like Casper getting able to communicate with you. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
My thanks again to Charlie for joining me on the show today. Switched on Pop releases new episodes every Tuesday and is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your preferred podcast player of choice. You can follow the show on the socials at Switched on Pop or visit www.switchedonpop.com for more info. If you want to follow Charlie on the socials, he is at Charlie Harding on Twitter X and at Charlie A. Harding on Instagram and Threads. Links to all of those are, of course, as always, in the show notes. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to the Yo, That's My Jawn podcast, wherever you get your podcast from. And guys, it is never too late to get yourself a super awesome Jawn Scout Merit Badge for citizenship of the world just by rating and reviewing us. Don't forget to visit www.yothat'smyjawn.com for the link tree with links to articles, merchandise, all of the previous episodes of this podcast, guest appearances on other podcasts, and more. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for our mailing list to get all of the updates delivered straight into your inbox. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/YoThat'sMyJawn for updates and live streams. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter X at YoThat'sMyJawn, and search Yo That's My Jawn on YouTube to find the Yo That's My Jawn YouTube channel. Like and subscribe the heck out of that ish. We want to hear from you. Reach out, and touch some Jawn. Season 5, y'all. We are back at it. Thanks as always for spending some time with little old me. I very much appreciate it. Alrighty then. Blue skies. Until next time, everybody.
Hey yo, displace the guilt and embrace the pleasure. Your taste in music doesn't have to be measured. You ain't being judged.
Yo That's My Jawn is a Lonely Monk production, written and produced by yours truly, Nate Runkle. Theme song by Phil Tyler Music featuring Nate 3.0. Special thanks to Fox Run Brands, DX Ferris, Andrew Scott, Maggie Poulos, Dan Drago, Natalie Runkle, and the beautifully vibrant and wickedly stunning Katie Daubney. If you or anyone you know has any ideas they would like to share or any guests they would like to hear on the podcast, please feel free to reach out to us at yothat'smyjawn@gmail.com or hit us up on the socials at yothat'smyjawn. Until next time, be sure to displace the guilt and embrace the pleasure. Tilt your head back and shout to the world, Yo, that's my Jawn.